The night my parents demanded I buy my wife a BMW using my trust fund was the same night. I woke up in the ER with a pen forced into my hand. I remember the sound first, the steady beep of a monitor, cutting through the muffled chaos. Then the smell of antiseptic. Then my mother's voice, low but sharp, as if kindness had been surgically removed from it. Just sign it. It's for your future. My wife's birthday candles were still flickering in my mind. Her quiet smile, the way she said she didn't need anything extravagant. And yet here I was, bruised ribs, a splitting headache, and a document hovering over me like a threat. My father stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, already treating me like a disappointment that needed correcting. I tasted iron when I spoke. No, that's when the man in the suit stepped forward, opened his briefcase, and changed everything without raising his voice. I've always been the quiet one in my family, the one who listened more than he spoke, who calculated before reacting. Growing up, that made me easy to guide, easy to overlook, easy to assume I'd never push back. My parents built their lives on control disguised as care. Every decision came wrapped in obligation. School, career, even who I married. When I chose her, they smiled, but it never reached their eyes. She didn't come from money. She didn't play their games. And worst of all, she didn't need them. What they never understood was that my silence wasn't weakness. It was patience. The trust fund they kept referencing that night wasn't a gift. It was leverage. Set up by my grandfather, it came with layers of conditions, most of which they'd never bothered to fully read. They only saw the number, not the structure, not the safeguards. I'd spent years quietly learning those details. Not out of suspicion at first, but out of necessity. When you grow up being managed, you either stay dependent or you start paying attention. By the time I married her, I had already decided something. I would never let anyone, not even my parents, dictate the terms of my life again. They just hadn't realized it yet. Dinner had started like all their dinners did. Polite on the surface, precise underneath. Every word measured, every glance carrying more weight than it should. My mother noticed everything. The way my wife held her glass with both hands. The pause before she answered a question. "You're still not used to our kind of gatherings, are you?" she said softly, smiling just enough to make it sound like concern. My wife returned the smile. "I'm comfortable where it matters." A small answer, a quiet line. But I saw the shift, my father's fingers tightening around his fork, the faint clink against porcelain. They didn't argue. They never did. They corrected. "You know," my father added, not looking at either of us. Comfort is often confused with complacency. The candles flickered between us, casting shadows that stretched and bent across the table. My wife reached for my hand under it, a grounding gesture. She didn't squeeze. She didn't need to. Then came the gift conversation. "Birthdays should reflect growth," my mother said, her eyes settling on me now. "A car, for example. Something appropriate." Appropriate. Not thoughtful. Not meaningful. Appropriate. I felt their attention sharpen, like a test I hadn't agreed to take. And when I didn't respond immediately, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was deliberate. The document brushed against my fingertips again, and this time I didn't pull away. "Just a formality," my father said, his tone flattening, as if we had already moved past resistance and into compliance. But I wasn't listening to him anymore. I was watching the man in the suit. He hadn't spoken since he entered, hadn't reacted to the tension or the pressure filling the room. He simply observed, calm, detached, precise. When our eyes met, there was no urgency in his expression. No expectation, just quiet certainty. That's when it settled into place. This wasn't about a car. It never was. The BMW was just a test, a visible reward tied to an invisible surrender. If I signed, I wouldn't just be authorizing money. I'd be confirming something far more permanent, that they still had control. My mother leaned closer. "You're overthinking it," she murmured. "Maybe I used to, but not anymore." I let the silence stretch. Long enough for them to assume hesitation meant weakness. Long enough for my father to exhale in quiet irritation. Then I turned the paper slightly, just enough to actually read the line they thought I wouldn't notice. And for the first time that night, I understood exactly how far they were willing to go. So I stopped resisting and started choosing. I didn't argue after that. I didn't raise my voice or push the paper away again. Instead, I let my grip relax, just enough to make it look like I was finally giving in. What they didn't know was that I had already spent years preparing for a moment exactly like this. My grandfather hadn't trusted easily, and neither did I. During university, While everyone assumed I was coasting on inherited security, I was studying the structure of the trust itself, meeting with its independent advisors, asking questions my parents never thought to ask. Not out of rebellion, but out of clarity. There were clauses, quiet, precise safeguards. Any disbursement above a certain amount required dual authorization. Any document signed under medical distress could be contested. And most importantly, any attempt at coercion triggered an automatic review by the trust's legal overseer. The man in the suit wasn't theirs. He was mine. I had called him hours earlier, right after the accident that landed me here. I didn't need to explain much. The situation explained itself. So I adjusted the paper in my hand, letting the pen hover just above the line, my expression carefully neutral. From the outside, it looked like hesitation. In reality, it was timing. I wasn't trying to stop them anymore. I was letting them finish. The room held its breath as the pen touched the paper. I didn't rush it. I let the tip rest there, just enough to leave a mark, just enough for them to believe the moment had already passed in their favor. My mother exhaled softly, relief slipping through the cracks of her composure. My father straightened, the tension in his shoulders easing into something almost triumphant. That's when the man in the suit stepped forward. "Before this proceeds," he said calmly, placing a leather folder over the document, "I'll need to acknowledge the conditions under which this signature is being obtained." No one moved. He opened his briefcase with quiet precision and slid out a single sheet. Thicker, official, unmistakably out of place in a hospital room. My father frowned. "This isn't necessary." "It is," the man replied, just as evenly. Under the terms of the trust, any indication of pressure, especially in a medical setting, initiates a formal review. The word pressure seemed to echo. My mother's smile faltered. "We're his parents, and he's the beneficiary," the man said, meeting her gaze without emotion, "which gives him protection, not obligation." Silence settled again, but this time it felt different. He turned the paper toward them, tapping a single line. I didn't need to read it again. I already knew what it said, and so did they. My father was the first to react, but not with anger, at least not immediately. His expression tightened, like someone recalculating a situation that had slipped out of his control. "This is unnecessary," he repeated, quieter now, as if lowering his voice could restore authority. My mother didn't speak at all. She just stared at the paper, at that single line, her composure thinning in a way I had never seen before. The certainty she carried into the room was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar, doubt. The man in the suit didn't argue. He simply waited. That was the shift. For the first time, they weren't directing the moment. They were inside it, subject to it, just like anyone else. No influence, no shortcuts, just consequences. My wife stepped closer to the bed, her presence steady, unshaken. She didn't look at them. She looked at me. And in that silence, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. This wasn't just about money or control. It was about pattern, about how easily power can disguise itself as care, and how quietly it can take root if you let it. That night didn't just expose them, it redefined me. In the days that followed, everything became quieter, but clearer. The trust entered formal review, just as it was designed to. Communications from my parents shifted from confident demands to carefully worded messages, then to long stretches of silence. For once, they weren't setting the terms. They were waiting on them. I was discharged a week later. The bruises faded faster than I expected. The distance didn't. My wife and I didn't celebrate in any loud, dramatic way. We went home, ordered simple food, and sat together without needing to fill the space with words. There was a calm between us that felt earned, not given, not assumed. I didn't cut my parents off. Not entirely, but something fundamental had changed. Access became conditional. Conversations became intentional. And for the first time, I wasn't navigating them, I was choosing how much of them I allowed into my life. The trust remained intact, so did I. What they tried to take from me that night wasn't just money, it was authorship. And in the end, I didn't win by fighting louder. I won by deciding that my life would no longer be written in someone else's hand.